All right, so you play 2 years at Sonoma State, and then you walk on at Texas.
That's
How
right.
does you're a California kid, you grew up there, all that, and then you end up at Texas. How does to walk on to continue your career? How does one step lead to the other?
Yeah, Jeff, sometimes you're just chasing basketball. I think probably a lot like you and what you do and in athletics, sometimes you're just always chasing it. You have visions of what you want to do. And Sonoma State, I played for a great coach in Pat Viscaldo, someone that I'm still close with and have tremendous respect for. I just always wanted a crack to play Division One, and I always wanted an opportunity to do so. So I had reached out to many different coaches and programs across the country, and figured it would be in a walk-on spot, and uh, ended up at Texas. And then there was a coaching change, and so I was there, and Coach Barnes comes in from Clemson, and they end up only having 7 or 8 scholarship players. So they do a traditional, which seems like it doesn't happen anymore, a traditional tryout. And the tryout went from basically September 1st through October 15th, because October 15th back in those days is when you could officially start practice.
Right.
And it was a 6-week tryout, 6 a.m., 5 days a week. And it was almost basically a victory by attrition.
Just
Who
weeding
could
guys
last?
out of there.
Who could last the longest?
Yeah.
So that's what happened, and I met Coach Barnes on October 15th.
You played one game that season. If my notes are right, one game, you took one shot, you grabbed one rebound. What do you remember about that game, if anything?
Iowa State was the game.
Yeah.
That's the team we played against, and you know, just a memory, just a fond memory. I think anytime you get a chance to do that, and look, we're all competitors, and anytime you play, you want to compete and you want to play and whatnot. But I was in a different mindset. I was very excited to be able to fulfill a dream and play Division One basketball, and we had a chance to make the NCAA tournament that year and play and do that. And I knew where my career was headed. I knew what the direction I wanted to go, and yeah, I was very thankful for that opportunity, albeit not much, but just to play and be a part of a great team with teammates that I'm still have friends there, with. And even more importantly, I graduate, and the next, basically, we lose to Purdue in the NCAA tournament on a Saturday or Friday or Saturday night, whatever it was. And I'm in coach's office the next day on Monday when we get back, watching film and beginning my journey into coaching.
What was it about him? Because obviously, you go to Texas to walk on. You don't meet him until October 15th. But what was it about uh, just what you were able to sponge off him as a player, I guess, but looking sort of long term, that you're like, this is a guy that I can learn some stuff from.
Well, in my opinion, Jeff, he's one of the best ever. I mean, he's a
Sure.
Hall of Fame coach that, whether it be on the court, off the court, and as great as a coach as he is, he's even a better human being. So I soaked up everything I could. I couldn't, we could do a whole conversation, and the whole thing could be about coach and all the greatness that he is as a person and as a coach. But every day, I soaked it in as a player. I can still remember vividly practices. I can remember meeting him the night of October 15th. It was old school back then. We had Midnight Madness. I mean, we were going to the Frank Irwin Center at 11 o'clock at night, getting ready to warm up and have practice at midnight in front of fans. So, and I met him, and that's when I found out that I had made the team. I mean, after that 6-week rigorous process going through that. So, but I can remember from training camp starting October 15th. We'd get away. We went away the first weekend, the first available weekend. We went 2 days and practiced somewhere else. I can remember practices, how I felt before practices, after practices, before games. I still in my mind remember his pregame speeches, talking to players individually. So many things, so many neat stories that I've held. And then, the real fortunate part about it is, as influential as that was for me and for him, the moment he asked me and said, "Hey, if you want to coach, I think we have an opportunity maybe here for you to do so." And I can remember that to a T, that exact moment and feeling. I had a chance, whether it's at Texas early in my career or the last 6 years at Tennessee, to see it from a totally different perspective and to see, in my opinion, one of the all-time greats do something where I want to try and replicate it, duplicate it, and use his blueprint in so many ways to hopefully be a successful coach myself. So I'm just forever indebted and feel very fortunate to know him, let alone work with him and for him.
You were only a player for a short time there, and then you transitioned into this grad assistant position. What was that transition like from, obviously you're, as I've always kind of described it, you're sort of in the purgatory between the coaches and the players, and you're kind of in the middle, and you've got attachments to both sides of the aisle there. But in terms of, hey, these are guys I just played with, and now I've got a different role. How did that transition go for you there, especially that first year?
I think it's one of the coolest things about the transition when you go from player to coach. And everyone has a different journey. Some maybe weren't players and some were fantastic star players or, very, very highly touted, long careers and getting a little bit older. But mine it's unique in its own form, is that I was graduating college. Again, we lose to Purdue, and the night before we play Purdue, we're playing in the Fleet Center in Boston, the first year of the Fleet Center in Boston in 1999. And we're there at Boston University practicing, and coach calls me over, and I'm in my practice uniform. We had just done our walkthrough for Purdue, and he says, it was probably a Thursday or Friday night because unfortunately it was in the first round that year. So I come into him and he says, hey, he's another assistant coach is there. He says, hey, what do you think about Mike being, a workout guy this summer and working with the players and something to that effect. And so I remember it so clearly. And so anyways, that Monday I'm in watching film and starting to break stuff down. I still have rest of the semester and summer to graduate. And that summer, we didn't know anything was going to happen because Coach Barnes has talked about this, that was his first GA at the University of Texas. And it's really turned into a prolific grad assistant coaching program. I mean, there's been so many good guys that have come through there and gone on to coaching, and more, now they have multiple GAs, as talking to all the coaches that you do, schools have. But it was one GA, and that was the first one. They hadn't had one there before, at least for him at Texas. So anyways, what I had a chance to do that summer was work with the guys. And I was a student, so I was really their teammate. And I had a chance to work the players out. And I did my own, had a chance, because back then, Jeff, you couldn't practice. Coaches couldn't spend time with players in the summer.
Right.
So if you could have a fellow teammate or a student that could do it, that was probably the best bet you could have back then. And so that's what I remember most, is that he gave me an opportunity to quickly transition from player to at least the coaching side of things. And what was really cool was the relationships I had with the guys that were going to come back for another year, or the new players that came in at some point. I had a chance to work that balance and work with them every day, basketball wise, and, just kind of life skills wise, but also I was really the same age as them, or maybe just a little bit older, depending on who it was. And I had friendships with them. And that was a neat entry into coaching for me.
Your 2-year run as a GA ends, and you head back to California to go to Long Beach State to do video there. I guess just is there any anxiousness at all about, hey, I've been in this great cocoon here for 3 years and just learning with this great guy, but I gotta go. I gotta, even just for a year before you came back. But what was the process like of finding a landing spot to continue this path?
Well, it ended up being a great thing for me. And it was probably my young and being naive in the coaching business that I was honestly, Jeff, more concerned with being back on the West Coast, back closer to my family. My grandfather had just passed that previous year. And so I was more thinking about being back at home where my mom was, my brother, my grandmother, my whole family, then I was really understanding how fortunate I was in that moment to be at Tennessee and an opportunity to actually go from a grad assistant into a part-time staff position there. And I chose to go try and see if I could attack a position at Long Beach State. And the whole funny story behind the whole thing is I left. I didn't get the position at Long Beach State. The position I originally wanted and thought I was going to get, I ended up not getting. And so now I had left Texas, gone out to California, didn't get the position I thought I was going to get. And I was in a scramble mode and very fortunate. I'm always very grateful and thankful to Wayne Morgan, who was the coach at Long Beach State at the time. He was a longtime assistant for Jim Boeheim at Syracuse prior. He gave me an opportunity to volunteer there. That year that I was there doing video and basketball operations, I was a volunteer, and he worked it through compliance and through the university to allow me to be a volunteer video, video assistant, whatever you want to call it. So I just was extremely fortunate to have that opportunity, and it ended up being great for me. And then it happened to be that position was open again at Texas that following summer. And I was so excited to go back and be with coach and be back there and begin my next chapter as a video coordinator there for 2 years.
As a, to your point, sort of that youthful naivete or whatever it may be, but here's your first hurdle, professional hurdle thrown at you that you don't have a job and now you have to volunteer. And was there any moment of, well, maybe this isn't going to work, maybe I need to go sell insurance? Was it, I'm just going to, I guess as the phrase goes, eat shit for a year and just get it done so I can figure this thing out and make sure I'm getting paid in 12 months?
Well, probably financially, Jeff. I probably ate, well, I'll let you use the term. I probably ate that for a lot more than a year early on in my career. So, you know what? This is what it was. Yes, there were moments that you weren't what was going to happen. And it was, you're out there in that time frame. You feel like, man, I could have been still at Texas, and you're looking at everyone else. And I went to John Wooden back then. They used to do the Wooden Award at the downtown. I think it's the Downtown Athletic Club in Los Angeles. And I went down there and just went. And Steve Lavin was the coach at UCLA, and Steve Fisher was the coach at San Diego State, and whomever was there. And I was just saying, hey, what can I find just to see if I could stick for a year and stay in this thing, because the timing of it wasn't great. I left in May or June, Texas, and didn't get the job at Long Beach State. And there was a pretty good gap there where I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do to get back in it. And then again, so happy and thankful that Wayne Morgan was able to do that. But, the funny story was this: the day Wayne Morgan called me, I actually got a job offer outside of basketball to make what you would call an entry-level salary with benefits. And in college coaching, the word benefits means nothing for the first 10 years of your career. You don't even know what benefits mean. I mean, that you don't think about that stuff. But I actually got a call, and someone offered me, because I'd been doing temp jobs here and there, offered me an opportunity for a full-time position, more in the corporate world. Good pay in Los Angeles, where I was living with my grandmother at the time, benefits. And the same day they offered me that, I got the call from Coach Morgan that said, would you be interested in volunteering? I think we were able to get this cleared. And without hesitation, I told him, absolutely. I said, I didn't even run it by anybody. I said, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I figured if I probably told people what I was doing, they probably would have tried to convince me the other way. So,
right. Best to keep that one to yourself. When after the year and you go back to Texas and you do the video there for 2 years, but you've been there, you've been a player, you've been a GA, you go away, you come back. Were you looked at differently, even just being away and coming back? Or and whether it's, hey, you've got a little more experience, we I don't know, respect you maybe a little more, just, and not necessarily Coach Barnes, but just everybody as a whole, or was it just like, hey, you just walked out and you're back, and let's just pick up where we left off?
That's a great point. And the thing was, where I got my start really with Coach was in the summer, working players out, because I was a player. I still was a student. So that next summer when I went back, the position wasn't officially open until, so I was just there working camps, and I was just around, and I was just helping any way I could when I went there. I lived in a dorm in the summertime, the same dorm that the campers lived in, and I just stayed there. And, that year, Jeff, was really, I don't know if I want to call it the springboard, but it's where everything clicked for me in coaching. And obviously some of the adversity that I had gone through prior, in terms of leaving Texas, again, just being naive, not knowing what this business was about, some of the family stuff in terms of my grandfather passing and making decisions, things like that. When I went back, that's when it all clicked. And what I mean by that is this: there was a few different players. The team, it had a turnover of players. So it wasn't necessarily all the same players. There was a young group coming in with that time. And so I came in with new guys. Two assistants that came in that year that I'm still very close with, and obviously had tremendous impacts in my career, Frank Haith and Rodney Terry, both came in to be assistant coaches that year, along with Russell Springman, who was a coach. But because of staff turnover that had just happened to happen that same year that I left, Rodney, Terry, Frank Haith are there. I developed great relationships with them. And so in that video spot, my connection with Coach Barnes was the same, but like you said, from the player standpoint, from the remainder of the staff, it was different. And I think that allowed me to grow because I had more responsibility on myself. I think they trusted me with more coaching-like aspects. I got a chance to learn from different people after being gone from it for a year. And it just that was kind of the start. That's where the ball started rolling.
2004, you get your first assistant job, official assistant job there at Texas San Antonio with Tim Carter. What did you feel like you were ready? Did somebody kind of nudge you like, "Hey, you're ready. You need to go"? How did you make the leap to, this? Now you got things rolling because you're one of those assistants on staff now.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to tell you a funny story that nobody knows. The first time I've really talked about this.
I love these stories. Go ahead.
So that spring and summer, I was chasing a job at UT San Antonio very hard. This was in May, the job you're speaking of. Texas San Antonio, Tim Carter's the coach. They have an opening, and I really want that job. It's 70 miles away from Austin, maybe less. And I've been a video guy for 2 years. By no means was I wanting to leave, but I was ready to recruit and ready to have an opportunity to coach, or in my mind, I wanted that challenge, and I didn't care where it was. This just happened to be one down the road in Texas. We had come off a Final Four, come off a Sweet 16. We knew another coach on the staff at UTSA, and Tim Carter is a great, great man. I'm still very close with him today. This was the one I wanted, and I pursued this job for probably 6 weeks, and I'm going after the job, and I really want the job. I can't make any headway, or at least every time I think I'm making headway, it goes the other way, and it goes quiet. Well, long story short, I'm also getting married that August in San Diego. My wife and I, she's in Austin. We're going to get married in San Diego. And UC San Diego hires a new coach. UC San Diego is a Division II school in La Jolla, down in San Diego. And so now we're talking probably early June. Well, because of the frustration I had that I couldn't make headway, in my opinion, I had driven down to San Antonio, met with coach, surprised him, done all the stuff that everyone's done, trying to get him to say, "Hey, I'm the guy, coach. I'm the one for this spot." It was a $25,000 third assistant spot. And I can't feel, and I get an opportunity to go for $12,000 to take a Division II assistant job in San Diego. And probably against the advice of Coach Barnes, Frank Haith, who was an assistant at the time, again, being naive and young and being really hungry, I say, I'm going to do it. I said, I want to coach. I want to recruit. So my wife and I lived in Austin, and she wasn't my wife yet. I had my place. She had hers. She sold her place. We drive across the country to San Diego and leave Austin, Texas in the beginning of June. out there for about 4 weeks coaching. I'm on my way home to where we lived at the time, which you can imagine. I got a job paying $12,000 and my wife's trying to figure it out.
In San Diego.
We're just trying to figure it out. We had something lined up for September. I think we had a lease signed, or we knew we were going to be okay. But long story short, my phone rings and I look, and it's Tim Carter from San Antonio. And he answers the phone and he says, "I'm going to ask you one question." I said, "What?" "If I offered you the job today, would you take it?" And I said, "Absolutely, coach." Hang up the phone. I go inside. I tell Stephanie, I said, "Stephanie, I think we're moving back to Texas." A couple weeks go by. It finally happens. I see coach. We meet. We pack our stuff up. We drive back to San Antonio. And we move back to San Antonio, where we just were 50 miles, 60, 70 miles north in Austin. And I was ready. Yeah, I was ready for that. I was ready for that job and excited to have it, as you could imagine.
All right. 2 follow-ups to that. First of all, how does the conversation go with the coach at UC San Diego that you've been there 4 weeks and now you're out the door?
It's funny you say that. I was out recruiting. I had gone out to recruit, and I called him and I said, "Coach, I just got a call." His name was Bill Carr. Great man, great coach. He was an assistant at Long Beach State, not with me, but that's where he got the job at UC San Diego from. And I said, "Coach, I got a call." He was aware that I had been pursuing that job prior to taking that position. He had not even fully moved down to San Diego yet. He was still commuting from the Orange County area. I had moved there. So I was really the only one that was in the office at UC San Diego for a few weeks. I was there. He'd come in and out. No one had been settled. As you can imagine, getting settled in San Diego is not an easy thing. We were lucky. My wife is from San Diego, originally was born there, and I'm from Los Angeles. So we had a little bit more inroads to kind of balance. So I tell him, I said, "I think I'm going to have an opportunity to go," and Coach Carter called and offered me that position. And when I told him, I think for a split second, it's what we all would think is, man, I'm just, and then very quickly he said, "Look, it makes sense." I mean, I was making $12,000 a year at UC San Diego. Back to the benefits, obviously no benefits.
Right.
So $12,000 in California is some kind of negative number. It's somewhere in that range. And so he says, I understand. I fully understand. And I was so grateful to him, because really that's who gave me my first full-time assistant position in terms of recruiting, coaching, where you're in that role from an NCAA standpoint, you're considered a full-time coach. And so he was great with it. And I, again, great respect for Bill Carr, and he's a great coach and a great man.
As a 25, 6-year-old who's pursuing a job, as you said, I want that job. I'm going to go chase that job down. What does that mean? And your point, you drove down, you talked to Coach Carter, you ambushed him, whatever. But is it for guys in your position at that point? Is it you're making calls, you're calling in every favor you can to everybody else that might have his ear? I mean, it's every possible path of entry, right?
I think so. I think it's an all-out blitz. That's what you're doing, and you're hoping you can get to the quarterback on that one. And so, yeah, I think you're careful with what you do when you have other people calling and doing that stuff. I think you have to be strategic about that, whether it be relationships, timing, and things like that. And I think what you learn is you never know why the decision process is taking longer than you hope.
Right.
It may have nothing to do with you. It may be what that head coach is going through. It may be what's going on with the administration. There's so many things that I didn't realize back then that I learned after. And there was a good reason why there was that 6-week time period that I didn't know what was going on. I found out after the fact, and it made a whole lot of sense to me. But during, you don't know. So from a standpoint of individually, you do all the things that you would imagine. Yeah, you're sending, now it's all digital, but you're sending letters, you're sending mail outs, you're sending anything you can do that shows, hey, here's some of the stuff I've done at Texas. There have been, whether it's recruiting wise, scouting wise, anything you can say to say, hey, I can help elevate and help your program or help us be better at whatever university or coach you want to work with and work at. So yeah, you do that. But again, you're careful on how much you don't want it to teeter on the edge of,
Right.
You just want them to leave you alone. So it is that fine balance. But I did use a good word, ambush. One time I drove down there and I found a meet him, but that was an easy one. That was whatever. That took an hour and a half. But when I was in San Diego and after he called me and said to me, would you accept this job? And I said, yes. That was not an easy conversation with my wife. That's the one that was a little more tricky. But when I didn't find out over the next couple of weeks, was it really going to happen? Because it still had more time to kind of marinate.
Yeah.
I flew out there again, and I had some intel tell me where he likes to eat on a Sunday. And the next thing you know, on a Sunday in the restaurant, I showed up with a suit on. And I did kind of caught him off guard. But you know what? Maybe it worked, I guess.
I think it did. Obviously. All right. So you've said more than once you wanted to recruit. You wanted to go. So you're at San Antonio. You finally get to recruit. What was it about? Was there something about recruiting that was sort of the shiny object for you, or was that to you just sort of an end of the means of the end of that's part of the job, and I know I'm climbing the ladder if I'm out on the road recruiting?
I think it's probably both. I think anytime you're a young video player development grad assistant and you watch the assistant coaches and they're out recruiting and they're going to events or they're going to recruit high school, and then on official visits you see people come in and you can just see the relationships that they have, and as you're trying to build a program and bring players in. So you see that. And so you're envious of that and you want that because you say, man, that's what I want to do. And then the other side is you hear as anybody young getting into the business, it doesn't matter, what position you are. If you aren't in one of those, and this is back then, it is different now, Jeff. And I tell you, it is so different. And maybe we'll discuss this or not, but back then, if you were not an assistant coach, it was very difficult to recruit. You couldn't call anybody. You could be no contact with a coach, with a high school prospect, junior college, whomever. There was just NCAA wise. Now it's totally different. They've opened that up in certain ways to give, and it's great. They should, to give young entry-level coaches a chance to move up quicker or show they can do it. But when I say I wanted to recruit, it was also because I said, well, if I don't get recruiting experience, how am I going to get an opportunity to ever become an assistant coach? How am I going to get an opportunity, the ultimate goal, to become a Division I head coach? You need you need recruiting experience. A job would open up. One of the reasons why I had to fight so hard and scratch and claw to get that job with Tim Carter was, all right, well, no recruiting experience. So you just want, and that was a big reason why that UC San Diego job, I said, well, hey, you know what? It might be a different level. Forget the financial. You can never think financially when you're in coaching. It was, I'm going to get recruiting experience and I'll just figure it out from there. As you know, you've talked to a lot of coaches. Coaching and a lot in your career is, hey, I'm just going to make the best of this and I'm going to figure it out from there.
Any memories of any of the first recruiting trips there at San Antonio? First time getting to put on the polo and go out to the gyms and shake some hands and try to find some players?
Well, one of the neat things was when I left San Diego, I was recruiting down in Los Angeles area. There was an event there. I left and I did my formal resignation from San Diego. I wasn't there. I had not been hired yet at San Antonio, but the drive, I drove through Las Vegas to go back to San Antonio. I took the path because back then, the biggest tournament was going on in Las Vegas at the end of every summer. Basically, you were looking at like the 27th through the 31st of July would be the best event of the summer. There was 3 big tournaments there. So what I did was on my way back, I stopped there. I did not put the polo on, but I was there. And I said, hey, I'm about a week to 10 days away from being an assistant coach. I'm here on my own, which was totally fine because I wasn't hired yet. but I was moving around in those gyms, going to watch players, and I was seeing guys I knew, and it was awesome. I mean, the guys at Texas were there that I had worked with. I mean, everyone knew where I was going, but I just, on my way back to San Antonio to go do all the formalities of becoming the assistant there, I stopped off and I stayed 3 nights or 2 or 3 nights in Las Vegas. And so that's really my first memory of being out on the road is in recruiting and I wasn't even a coach yet.
1 year in San Antonio, and then Frank Haith goes to Miami, and obviously you've got a relationship with him. And how difficult was the balance for you of, okay, I can go from San Antonio to Miami, but I'm not on the road, and now I'm going to be the director of ops. There's obviously a little push and pull there. How hard was that decision to take that step?
That was really difficult. And that's a great point because I really weighed that a great deal. And if it's not Frank Haith, someone that I had a real close relationship with, I don't think I do it. I'll be honest. So I basically, if I don't have the opportunity to go back to Texas or go to Miami at that time, I don't think I leave Tim Carter at UTSA and get off the road, so to speak. The relationship I had with Frank, and I knew his family, I knew his kids, I knew his wife. Obviously, the time when we went to a Final Four together, 1 year at Texas, went to the Sweet 16 the next year. So those things drew me to saying, you know what, how cool is this? He's getting ready to take a program that's leaving the Big East, going into the ACC, and it's his first head coaching job. And I just thought that was so cool because even though I wasn't going to be on the road, so to speak, as a full-time assistant, my relationship with him and what he had conveyed to me about the role I would have in terms of my responsibility on the staff or what he would depend on me for or look to me for was, in my mind, what could help me advance and help me, get better as a coach. I wasn't going to be pushing paper there. So to, in my mind, I was going to get a chance to continue to grow. And you know what? I also learned after recruiting for a year, you know what? You can do everything within the rules of recruiting, but use your network and you can stay engaged in recruiting even if you are not on the road as an assistant coach. So that helped me that time at UTSA. So that was it. And you say push and pull, and it's a great way of saying it, but that's why I was able to be excited about making that move. It had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with, okay, it's the ACC versus the Southland Conference. None of that. It was the opportunity to be with Frank Haith when he was establishing himself in his first program. And I did the same again later with Rodney Terry. And I love that. Being a part of building a program from the beginning is really neat.
So after 2 years, then you get promoted to assistant at Miami. You've only had 1 year of being on the road. Now, to your point there, things had evolved, and you were able to be involved on some level in recruiting. But you've gone from being on the road for 1 year in San Antonio. Now you're in the ACC. I mean, did it feel comfortable for you, or did it take a little while to maybe in your gut feel like you've earned it and you're ready and I can go, because obviously you're swimming in very deep waters at that point?
I think you're so hungry for these opportunities, Jeff, whether it's GA to becoming a video guy or video guy to becoming an assistant coach, and then an assistant coach trying to become a head coach and see, can you help build a program and maybe have some success, or maybe you get a chance to move up professionally. It's just about professional advancement. I mean, that's what everybody is chasing a lot of the time in terms of as you're trying to accomplish goals. And so really you rely on the same stuff, and that's why you feel so fortunate that you're around great coaches. I was around Frank. I saw how he worked at Texas. I was around Rodney Terry. I had the chance to have a foundation somewhat from Coach Barnes, someone that, again, talk about, I think is as good as there's ever been in this coaching profession. So what you do is it's the hunger and the kind of drive to want to be successful, while relying on who you are as a person, but also more importantly, what you've learned from people that you really respect and people you trust. And I just feel very fortunate that the people that I saw work, it didn't put any anxiety or fear into me that we were in the ACC or we're a program that's at the bottom of the ACC trying to build towards the top. I said, hey, we just got to do what we've always done and do it better and better and try and outwork people and do things like that. And that was more my mentality. But it was definitely very appreciative for the opportunity. I never lost sight of that, and I never have to this day, the opportunity that I had to do that.
2011, Frank Haith leaves Missouri, and you go back west, go to Fresno, find a familiar face there in Rodney Terry leading that program, and spend 4 seasons out there. What'd you learn from him? And I guess was it nice being relatively home? I mean, back on the West Coast after growing up there and not having to just make $12,000 anymore.
It was really nice. It was nice to be home, and Fresno is 3 hours north of Los Angeles. And we go back to what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation was the West Coast piece. That was something that outside of the probably 8 or 9 months I was in California at Long Beach State and the 4 to 5 weeks I was at UC San Diego, I hadn't had a chance to coach out there. And so, and I had tried. There were jobs. There was an assistant job at Loyola Marymount one time open, and I really wanted it. There were positions that I really tried to get when I was in those younger stages, and I wasn't able to get them. So, yeah, that was nice. The California, and that's why, again, it goes back to what we just talked about, leaving San Antonio to go to Miami. The 2 biggest draws about going to Fresno State were, number one, Rodney Terry. Here he is, a very close friend of mine that has been involved with head coaching jobs, some that he wanted and didn't get, some that he probably had an opportunity to get and didn't take because he was at such a great place at Texas. I mean, heck, he was there with Kevin Durant. I mean, he's there experiencing some of the greatest years of Texas basketball. So when he gets his, here I'm saying, man, he wants me to come with him to have an opportunity to help him build his program. Again, a school that was in the Western Athletic Conference in the WAC, and we're going to be in the WAC 1 year. They were in last place the year before he got there. We go into the WAC. We're in 1 year left in the WAC, and then we're going into the Mountain West. And the Mountain West at that time, I think in that stretch, right around then, they had 5 teams in the NCAA tournament. They were, I think, either number 2 or 3 RPI-wise in the country in terms of a conference. It was a really strong time for that league. And the chance to go help him and be by his side and be in the foxhole with him to help him build a program, someone that I had a great friendship with, someone that I really trusted and respected, and do it close to home where my mom and my brother and my family were there. I was really excited about it. And it was an unbelievable 4-year experience at Fresno State. Probably the most growth I've had as a coach.
It's really just amazing just looking at your resume and just all you were fortunate to have the relationships you built in those first couple of years and just how the breadcrumbs lead you through the whole path. Yeah. You get done with Fresno, you go back with Frank Haith at Tulsa for a year. And then I'm assuming that's where, hey, we've got an opening in Knoxville and Coach Barnes is he calling you, or are you ambushing him in a restaurant on a Sunday afternoon to try to get that
No, you
job?
don't ambush Coach Barnes. You try to ambush Coach Barnes, you're going to lose that one. That one is, you're not winning that one. So, no, the best part about it was when at Fresno, I get to really take a different role as the associate head coach when it comes to recruiting. And I had a chance to be very offensive focused there, and Rodney trusted me and allowed me to work directly, in that offensive role. And then, I have a chance to go to Tulsa and they had a great staff at Tulsa. I mean, Dennis Felton is on staff there, and obviously Coach Frank Haith is the head coach, and Shea Seal's a great player there as a coach. And that's where I meet Kim English. That's where I met Kim English. He comes in as, I think it was director of player development that year as I'm getting there. And so, and I get a chance to work offense that year too. And so now between heavy recruiting at all the stops. And at Miami, I was more defensive focused. At Fresno, offense. At Tulsa, offense. Recruit. You're getting a chance to really kind of fill in some of those gaps and those holes as you're trying to become a well-rounded coach to hopefully have an opportunity to be a successful head coach at some point. And just the way it worked, coach goes to Tennessee, he leaves Texas, he goes to Tennessee, and after a year, he has movement on his staff from Chris Ogden, who was the graduate assistant that took my place when I left. When I left grad assistant to go to Long Beach State, Chris Ogden came and became the next graduate assistant there. And I was there when Chris Ogden came in as a player. His very first day as a freshman, I can remember he was wearing cowboy boots. I remember he was West Texas, Mr. Basketball in the state of Texas, a phenomenal player. He's a great coach. He's at Texas now. But I remember him when he was an incoming freshman. Then he was a student assistant in my last year as a GA. And then now full circle, he leaves Tennessee as an assistant to go to UNLV with Chris Beard. And that position opens up. Rob Lanier is on staff at Tennessee with Coach Barnes, who Rob Lanier took Rodney Terry's place when Rodney took the job at Fresno State. And Rob and I worked together when I was a GA at Texas. Rob was an assistant. And he and I, to this day, like this, very tight. So it's what you said. When that web starts getting tangled,
yeah,
I was very fortunate enough just to be caught up in it somewhere.
It's almost to a more expanded degree from when you returned after the GA and came back, a year later to do video.
That's right.
Now it's a dozen years later and you're back. How much more confidence do you have in yourself as a basketball mind and coach and recruiter and every part that comes to the job, just walking back in the door there in 2016, as opposed to obviously just a decade earlier when you were still just a pup?
Yeah. And I definitely felt more self-assured because you kind of know who you are as a person. I'm now married. I have 2 daughters. I have kids. I've been through a lot more experiences, but I'll tell you, Jeff, one thing, when you look up to someone so much the way I do to Coach Barnes, I mean, he's my coach. I can never look at him like my boss or like a coworker. He's my coach. And I think in athletics, when you look at who your coach is, there's always this wanting to run through a wall for him and make sure you do everything right to help him be successful. And it's even another level of pressure that you put on yourself than yourself being successful. And so the unique thing was, even though, and I don't know how old I was when I got the Tennessee job, I'm 45 now, and I don't know, I was probably in my late 30s or something when I got there to Tennessee, right around there. I still looked at it and I still felt like a player playing for Coach Barnes. You got to do everything you can to make sure he's successful. Whatever, you cannot let him down. And I think you feel like that about everybody you work with, work for, and yourself. Obviously, you want to do everything you can to be successful as an individual, but it's on a different level when you get, because I dreamt for the previous whatever many teen years to have an opportunity to be an assistant coach for Coach Barnes. I always wanted it. I always said, and I started to, man, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe it's getting later. He's at Tennessee now. And when I got that chance, you talk about, yes, self-assured, yes, but that feeling of just, there's no kind of comfort about it. You got to make sure you do the right. It's like you got to make that time when you're sprinting or your coach is going to yell at you. Yeah, I felt like I was doing sprints every day. I got to make sure a coach doesn't tell me that I'm not doing the right thing.
Before you make the move to East Carolina, you had other opportunities. And whether those were opportunities that you passed on or they passed on you, when you are looking for that first head coaching job, and especially after you had been in the business long enough and at different places to see how different things work, what were you looking for as there are enough appealing boxes that are checked at that place that's a job that I want to pursue, whether it was East Carolina or any other place?
Well, the first thing is, I think you always got to temper it, because there's this real drive and kind of desire and hunger and to be a head coach. And I think all assistant coaches that want to be a head coach feel it. And, the 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I've been in the business. I had been in it 23 years. And so at some point in that 23-year span, I started thinking about, I feel like I'm ready. I want to have a chance. And then each year it multiplies more. And Coach Barnes used to mess with me all the time. He used to say, man, I know how bad you want to be a head coach. You just got to be patient, and you just got to, and when and if that opportunity comes, most importantly, he said, you got to be ready and prepared. And so, but and that was the great thing about Coach Barnes, is just his honesty and transparency. And I mean, you think about all the coaches that he's had that have worked for him, that have had a chance to go on and be head coaches. It's because he tries to prepare his guys, and he doesn't shy away from it. He talks about it, and he actually pushes you towards it. But with all that being said, one thing I learned from him, and we always used to talk about this, was it's the people. And so who are you going to work with? Who are you going to work for? He always said it. He always said, your AD, who you work for, who you work with is paramount. It's the most important thing. And he's had some of the best athletic directors ever. You think about DeLoss Dodds at Texas, and he's talked to me about his ADs in administration at Providence and at Clemson and Texas, and then obviously now at Tennessee, and all the people he's worked for, and now Danny White being there now. But that was the big thing. It was our administration here. It was John Gilbert. It was his staff that he has, who I had familiarity with from our time at Tennessee, who John is as a person, who he is as a leader. That was the first thing. That's kind of the on surface part. That's right there. That's apparent because of the relationship. And this whole conversation, we've been talking about all the relationships, and that was a big one. But ECU has so much special opportunity here, and there's so many great things that made me feel like if I could become the head coach there, and if this worked out, in the spring, wow, there was so many things I was excited about here.
I hate to use the phrase foregone conclusion, because I know that's quite the leap in trying to land a job like this. But to your point, you East Carolina's AD, John Gilbert, you had a relationship with him when he was at Tennessee. His son was a walk-on there, so you knew him. But just listening to you in a prior news conference talk about, it's the SEC tournament on Friday, and their job's open, and he reaches out briefly. And then after you guys win it on Sunday, he drives the 6 hours to Knoxville. I mean, I've tried to get enough jobs. It's not often that the guy who wants to hire you comes rolling in, he hops in the car for 6 hours and drives. That you've got to feel you almost have to screw it up to not get it kind of at that point. But when the moment comes that it's official and he's like, buddy, if you want it, it's yours. What, after, to your point, 23 years of grinding through all of this, what is that moment like for you?
Almost surreal. It really is. Probably of all the things, and I could sit back and we talked about me remembering practices when I was a player, and I remember all these moments over the last 23 years. When I think about this time frame from the SEC tournament through being so thankful that John and his and our senior women associate athletic director here, Caroline Bevillard, also came with him on Sunday evening to Knoxville. And when I think about that, and then going to Indianapolis in the NCAA tournament, and then the following week being here, that's where this is all a blur right now. And so we just finished up yesterday, Jeff, and I'm actually going to sit back and really take a step back and try and take myself back to that Sunday where we beat Texas A&M and won the SEC championship. And, all of a sudden that evening met with John, and then was working on scouting reports for Longwood in Michigan and Colorado State as we were getting ready to go to Indianapolis. And then from there doing the press conference the day before the Longwood game. I mean, I was sitting in a hotel room with my computer propped up on a trash can, doing the press conference. I mean, just talking to the computer. And I remember sitting this, is this really happening right now? And I'm thinking about, we got Longwood tomorrow. And I was a little, to be honest with you, I was a little uncomfortable with the whole scenario. I even talked to John about that at the time, because I'd been in Tennessee 6 years, and we really felt like we had a chance. And man, and my commitment to Coach Barnes and those kids, man, like I didn't want anything, but here's the biggest opportunity of my life right here also. So that was a real, that was a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be in terms of how. So I don't know if I've ever given full thought other than trying to go day to day. And then once I got here on that following Tuesday, I really haven't had a chance to look back and think about that time. And so I'm actually kind of looking forward to it here over the next week or so, kind of thinking about how that all went.
Mike, my last question for you, and we ask everybody this on the way out the door, for that 21, 22-year-old young guy that's trying to get into coaching and someday wants to be where you're at and running their own program. What is the best piece of working advice that you can pass on to them?
You know what? There's obviously so many things, and there's so many different ways that people, I mean, this tree branches off into so many different directions, and you can end up at, so to speak, the top of the tree any different way. And I don't mean that literally, obviously, but just to become a head coach, if that's what you look at, and a young coach one. And I think it's awesome that you do this for coaches. And I can just feel that that's what this is about. Journey. How do you do it? What are some things that may have worked or not worked or whatnot? But I do remember thinking this when I was young, and I remember thinking, and I still to this day kind of go by this: whatever position you're in, whatever position I was in at the time, I just wanted to try and be the best I could be at that position. And so I remember thinking as a video coordinator, and I remember having this conversation also with a fellow guy that was another colleague, a coach at another school that was trying to, kind of in the same position as me. And I remember us having this discussion, and I said, look, I can't control if I'm going to get an opportunity to become an assistant here, somewhere else, someone's good. I said, but what I can control is you can try and be the best video coordinator that there possibly is. And they're never going to talk about that. No one's ever, none of the media is ever going to say, no one, it's just not. And that's perfectly good. That's a good thing. But I think if you approach each position you're in, grad assistant, video, player development, director of operations, whatever it may be. Now there's so many more titles out there because the staffs are larger. If you can just focus with the mentality and keep your head down and stay in the lane of, I'm going to be the very best there is at this position, what my job is to do. And if it entails this much, I got to be the best at this. If it's all this, I got to be the best. And then if you do that, usually it leads to more responsibility, and trying to be successful with more responsibility usually leads to professional advancement. Maybe that's the next position, an assistant coach, whatever it may be. But I don't know if there is good advice. I just know that that's what I remember always thinking. And whether it was an assistant for Tennessee, associate head coach the last few years there, or it was a grad assistant for Coach Barnes, 2 days after my college playing career was over, I just remember thinking, I got to find a way to be the best I can be in this position.